Hello, everyone, and welcome to Faith in an Ever Changing World Encouragement and Hope Faith Story. I'm Janet Harley, your host, and it's a pleasure to have with me today Shawn Procter. Hi, Shawn. Thank you for
Hello,
joining
Janet.
me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Sean is a program director at Grip Outreach for Youth in Chicago, and their mission is to invest in the lives of Chicago youth through Christ centered life on life relationships. And you can read more about Sean in the post that I have. And so, just welcome again, Sean, and
Thank you.
looking forward to your faith story journey. Uh, and right after this, we will hear Sean's faith story. Stay with us. And welcome back. And Sean, if you will, please share your faith story.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I was pursuing acting in Central Florida, living in Orlando, pursuing theater and television and film, and started to build a resume. And I was like living out my dream. I was 21 years old, and April of 1999. I was sitting watching the morning news, and the Columbine High School massacre basically was unfolding. That took place in Littleton, Colorado, where two young high school students walked into their school and with black trench coats and pipe bombs and assault weapons, and took the lives of students and teachers, and then took their own lives. And I remember getting very just disturbed. That was America's first school shooting, so to speak,
Yeah.
and I was just so brokenhearted. And I remember, watching the news all day and hearing the president at the time, talk about gun laws, and which, there needs to be certain laws, that restrict the use of certain weapons and the wrong
Yeah.
hands. But I remember going to my room and I was so upset. And I had, faith wise, I had been raised up in a Christian school. Mother had come to faith early on in my younger years, but not necessarily, I didn't have a faith that was intimate with the Lord. It was very much a fear of doing the wrong thing and not doing the wrong thing and doing the right thing. And so
Yeah.
my life in faith and Christianity was a lot about what I did do and didn't do, but not understanding the intimate love of Jesus for me and how much he longs to know us
Yeah.
as a bride, and the Father's adoption of us as his children, and so much. So I was not there yet. So I went to my room and I got on my knees and I began to pray, and I was actually really angry in prayer. And I was like, you got to show God, you got to show the president. This has so much more to do than with gun laws. This has to do with what happens to these two young men who did this, like what was going on inside of them. And I was like, you have to do something about it. And it was the first time ever in my life that I had ever heard the voice of God. And it was
Mm.
not audible, but it was in the spirit in such a way where I just knew it wasn't me, because I wasn't saying this to myself. And I heard, what are you going to do about it? And I
Mm.
was like, well, I'm praying. That's what I'm doing about it. Like, is that,
Yeah.
that's the right thing to do? And
Oh,
and at that moment, I felt super convicted. And I remember saying to the
yeah.
Lord, God, please use my life in some way to impact the lives of young people so they don't choose that direction. But please don't make me do Christian drama, and don't make me work at a church, because both of those just
Oh,
taste
mercy.
in my mouth. Sometimes they still are.
Stipulations on God. Yes.
And but from that point on, the holy chessboard player just started to direct my steps. And our Father,
Wow.
who is so faithful, who, the Bible says that man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. And that's exactly
Yeah.
what happened. Within a couple months after that, I was on a mission trip in Haiti that I did not want to be on. The
Mm.
Lord began to break me and show me that a lot of my pursuit in acting in that season was about receiving the applause of man and receiving the
Yeah.
affirmation of others and filling some insecurity voids in my heart.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, and he started to expose that as I was serving people in another country. Right. And so I
Mm.
came back from that trip and basically collapsed in my pastor's arms. And I was like, I know God's calling me to ministry, but I'm afraid of what that looks like. And I don't really want to do that. My idea of what that
Yeah.
was. And within about 2 months after that, I was living in Nashville, Tennessee at that. I mean, I was in Orlando, Florida before, and then boom, within 2 months, I'm living in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm traveling with a Christian
Wow.
drama team with a man named Brent Gambrell, who really shepherded my heart in identity in Christ, identity in using your gifts for the glory of God, but the gifts not being what you bow before, but the king of those gifts being who you submit to. And
Yeah.
I received such a heart for young people as we traveled the country doing conferences, doing little church events, big conference events. And it was an incredible encounter and experience watching him, that man, Brent, walk life
Mhm.
on life with me through
Right.
my 22nd and 23rd year of life. And he said, Shawn, when you first came on our team, you were an actor that was interested in this idea of what ministry looked like. And then you left this minister who could act. And I was like, I don't know if that sounds good, but I understand his heart. Ministry is about really just
Yeah.
serving
Well,
people. It's not this big, hard, like I can't wait to be a pastor, or I can't wait to be an evangelist, or I can't wait to be someone on a podcast. But the reality is, like, ministry is life. It's serving
yeah.
others from the heart that we
Yeah.
have for Jesus. So
Yeah.
after that point, I actually traveled with him for a couple years, and then a church that we had served in called me and said, thank God for this woman, Kenda. She said, Shawn, you worked with our junior hires for a week, and you were really good with those kids, and we need a junior high youth director for the summer. Would you consider?
Wow.
And I said no. And she called me back and said, did you pray about this? I was like, my summer's already booked. And she goes, well, if you prayed about it, you heard wrong from God, so you need to pray again. And I was like, what? So I prayed, and God cleared my entire calendar for the summer.
Wow.
I was like, oh my gosh. So I told her, I said, I'll move to Boca Raton, Florida from Nashville, and I will work with the junior high students for 3 months. And then I'm returning back to Nashville because I wanted to open up that acting world again and
Yeah.
travel with gentlemen that I was
Yeah.
traveling with before. And I stayed for 4.5 years. And in
Woo.
Boca Raton, Florida is where the Holy Spirit began to confirm the
Oh my
Father's love
goodness.
for me. I began to immerse myself in youth, in their families, and truly life on life. I was able to begin living life on life with young people, and I fell in love with Jesus and with his heart
Yeah.
for young people.
Yeah.
And I was not equating any of this with the original voice of God in 1999 with the Columbine tragedy. But that came in a little bit later. So now I'm, 28, and I've been working in the youth group in South Florida. And I had started taking classes at Moody Bible Institute against my own wishes. I didn't think I needed a degree. I had so many different things going on in my heart and my mind. But one of the elders from that church, Randy Degler, said,
Mm.
we're going to pay for you to do some Moody Bible Institute distance learning center
Wow.
classes. So he did that. And a couple years into that, I ended up sensing that I needed to move to Chicago to finish that degree. And that's all another really crazy God story. I didn't know anything about Chicago. All I knew is that the Chicago Bulls were here. Michael Jordan was here. Oprah Winfrey was here. The Bulls show was here way back when I was a kid. So I actually applied for Moody and was accepted within a couple weeks and moved within
Oh.
4 weeks of applying. So again, I moved into another big city that I'd
Mhm.
never been in and never lived in, and was kind of like, I didn't really want to do this, but stayed in Chicago for that year and a half to 2 years to finish out a degree, just a biblical studies major. And during that time, again, I was exposed to an entirely different world of young people and youth
Mhm.
culture. and culture just in Chicago. It's a beautiful and painful city. There's a lot of brokenness, but there's so much beauty, so much to be celebrated. And it kind of angers me when the news only features,
Yeah.
the brokenness, but doesn't talk about the systems that produce that brokenness. And that's
Right.
another story for another changing
Yeah.
world. But I will say I moved to Chicago in 2005. And at that point, I'm 28 years old. And I went to school, began waitering, got connected to a church, Chicago Tabernacle, where God introduced me to my wife.
Oh.
She's amazing. We got married and had a honeymoon baby. We conceived our daughter on our honeymoon after actually waiting for our first kiss on our wedding day, and then conceiving our daughter.
Boy,
But during that time, I was done with Moody Bible Institute, but I sensed God keeping me in Chicago, and I started teaching character-based abstinence education in the public high schools and middle schools of Chicago, which was quite an experience. And doing that, I watched students reject the information initially, but by the 8th session, some students, high school students in a diverse, population would come up with tears in their eyes saying, "What you're saying, I've never heard before. I did not know about thinking about my sexual choices and my choices with drugs and alcohol from the context of thinking about who I am and who I was made to be and what my goals are for my life and the various pathways that my life could take based upon my choices." And at that time, I was so excited to be in public schools, and I was like, this is awesome. That funding ended with the change of the presidential administration in the advancement of comprehensive sexual health education, which, again, that's another conversation. I'd love to come back and talk about because I see the outflow of messaging that is not true and not truth. Some of it's true, but not all of it's truth. Right. And during that time, God was really etching into my spirit, if you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And so I began to be very passionate about exposing lies, because lies lead to death, and revealing truth, because I believe truth leads to life. And so I would teach that way in the public schools. It was we were all faith-filled followers of Jesus that were in the schools, but our program was not Christian. And so the funding ended, and I was like, all right, I got a 1-year-old daughter. I got my wife, we're living out of our savings because we were making very, very little in that season. We had to short sell a condo. It was a really painful time of just kind of like, God, I believe we're following you, but this is getting really hard. And so we were like, Florida, there's our way out. And so in 2011, I am now 34 at that time. I was like, you know what? Let's move back to my hometown of Palm Bay, Florida, and maybe move to South Florida. I think I was talking about moving back to South Florida because there was a free place to live, a job for my wife, opportunities for me. My mom, my dad, my brother, his family, they were all excited about having me back to Florida. And in a season of fasting and prayer, the Lord said, I'm not done with you in Chicago. You will bring the gospel into public high schools. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do that, God? So again, like, what are you doing? And within a month, I was hired at Grip Outreach for Youth. And for the last 10 years, I've been Grip, the school program director, bringing volunteers from local churches, training them up to serve in local public schools and to walk life on life with students, doing a work of justice, which is serving needs that you see that are right to serve. And then God opening the door for conversations once people trust you and know your heart, and you're there not to be served, but to serve, just like Jesus was on the earth. And therefore it gives people it gives you the permission to speak life into people and to share with them why you do. I just recently transitioned into the Future Steps program director role here at Grip, which is all about jobs and career options and college pathways and internship pathways for students that are in mentor relationships to look into their future. And we are a Christ-centered organization and have been since our founding almost 20 years ago. 2004 is when we were made into a 501c3 certification came in 2004, but we've been doing programming since 99. But I'll tell you, I was in the public schools a few years ago, and the Lord reminded me, Shawn, do you remember April of 1999? And it makes me emotional thinking about it, but he said, you're in public schools and you're raising up other adults to love young people and to step into the lives of teenagers. And I was like, oh my God, like you absolutely took a horrible experience in Littleton, Colorado, and you utilize the pain and the brokenness to call me, and I know many others whose lives were changed from that tragedy, to direct our hearts and our steps into a pathway where we're investing in the next generation. And so that's my heart. My heart is that every Christian adult, regardless of what they do, would pour into the life of a young person that's not their own flesh and blood. Because I think the church, and I'm not a church basher. I'm a local church criticizer. When we try to build the kingdom with the little steeple on top, but we don't remember that we're the big C church, which really is not about a building. It's a people that are redeemed and loved and humbly accepted by God through the sacrifice of Christ on a cross, and then filled with the spirit of sonship so that we can be sent out to follow our Father's will and to look like his son. And so my heart, my frustration is we hear a lot of times, I'm living in a city that's been criticized by a lot of people, right, in the church. And but what I realize is a lot of people are like, it always starts at home. And so the homes of kids, that choose to do broken things and horrible things, where were those parents at? And my response is, well, where were you at? Where are you as the village? It takes a village. Where are you at stepping into the lives of other young people and their families, to get close enough to love and to serve and to learn and to humbly position yourself.
Instead of being so critical.
Yeah, you don't. Proximity breeds compassion.
Yeah.
And when you're proximate to hard things, you see those hard things in such a different lens than when you watch the news or sit in your pew and hear from a pulpit various ideas that sometimes are not the heart of Jesus. So I really hope that we can spend less time criticizing the state of our world and actually do something about it, right?
And you're right. We need to spend time with our youth because they are our future.
Yeah.
And so it is so important to do that.
And there are kids. That's the other thing that I buck up against sometimes when I hear it's like, oh, those kids. I was like, no, there are kids. So if you take out those and put in you feel an investment, right, into the world that God has planted you in for such a time as this. Absolutely. We're not supposed to go into our bunkers and wait for Jesus' return. We're supposed to go into the harvest field that's right. And not wait for the harvest field to come to us, but to go out and to be living full lives.
Absolutely.
Weeping with those who weep, rejoicing with those who rejoice, mourning with those who are mourning, and entering into the brokenness of the world, just like Jesus did. He incarnated into this world, humbled himself to the point of death, even death on a cross. And then God highly exalted him. And so there's a recipe in there. Descend, church, descend. And we had a horrible tragedy take place yesterday in Highland Park, which is about 30 minutes northwest of the city. And I when I read the news and saw the 22-year-old young man, my heart was broken because I'm looking in his eyes and I'm just thinking, I'm not thinking about what went wrong in his family. I'm not thinking about what went wrong in his upbringing. What I'm viewing is, who are the people that God planted in his path as he was growing up, as he was progressing into his career that he had, and who was stepping in and just loving him and serving him and ministering to him in the sense of not in a church setting, but in a life setting. Right. And it breaks my heart to think of all the influences he had working in his mind and in his heart that would lead him to the place of taking others' lives. And so
Yeah.
the work is not over.
No, no. And I
We
don't
got a
think it will
life on
ever
the
be over.
yes, for sure.
Shawn, I thank you so very much for being my guest today and for sharing this faith story journey. And I think you're still on it.
Oh, oh yeah.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Yes. And the
thank you.
creative arts is one of those areas that just in the
Yeah.
last 6 months, God's been almost returning to me in a very
Yeah.
odd way. And I think he took me
Yeah.
20 years out of it to see different things to place me back into it potentially. So I'm kind of on that journey too of like, what are you opening the door to, Father? And so he's
Yeah.
doing a lot. And I'm really
Absolutely.
grateful.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Shawn, for joining me this morning. And thank you all for watching. And I also want to thank the wonderful network family that I'm a part of, Creative Motion Network. Thank you all for watching as well. Have faith and look up, friends, where our help comes from. Bye. God bless.